Hey guys, and welcome back to Z3Cubing. Today I'm going to be trying out a handful of brand new speed cubing products from TheCubicle.com. The first is a custom Pyraminx based off the Yushin Little Magic M, designed by a really good Pyraminx speed solver. It's modded and set up to be really good for speed cubing right out of the box, and all of that at an extremely good price. The second is a new flagship 3x3 competitor from X-Man, but at a lower price than most high-end 3x3s. It has an interesting new adjustment mechanism that's easier to understand than any other 3x3 I've seen on the market. And finally, we have a cube display stand for Gan Cubes. I guess I'm just wondering what kind of crazy technology they managed to put in this thing to justify a $7 cube stand. Anyway, let's get started with this puzzle, which is called Steven's Little Magic Pyraminx. The modifications and setup were designed by Steven Winteringham, who averages 2.5 seconds on Pyraminx and has actually held the national record single. It looks like this one still has the original Yushin logo on it. The base puzzle, of course, was originally made by Yushin, but if you buy one, it'll come with a custom logo of the creator of the mod's initials. Also, this is the darkest green I've seen on a puzzle in quite some time, which makes me very happy because I quite like this shade. Here is the X-Man Bell V2 for comparison. Anyway, let's go ahead and do some first turns. Alright, so as you'd expect, the turning itself is nice and smooth, but the thing that really stands out to me is just how natural and fluid and controllable it feels. And the interesting thing is, this isn't any sort of revolutionary Pyraminx design. I mean, it's an $8 cube to begin with, but I think the fact is that Pyraminxes are just hard to set up if you don't really know what you're doing. Like, for example, if I try and turn reasonably fast on my current main, the X-Man Bell V2, I'm getting all sorts of weird lockups because the cube is too tight to do any sort of real corner cutting, but at the same time it feels all strangely fast and uncontrollable. And I mean, I think this is supposed to be a really good Pyraminx. I mean, it's like double the price of the base Yushin Little Magic M, but I think I just set it up really badly. And that's the thing about Pyraminx. There aren't really that many huge differences in hardware nowadays, I guess just because of the simplicity of the puzzle, but it's all about how you set it up. That's why such a relatively cheap cube like this can have such world-class performance. And just to warn you about this solve, I can't remember the last time I tried speed solving Pyraminx, so this might be a little bit rough, but 3, 2, 1, go. I'd say the turning of this Pyraminx is everything you could ask for. Smooth, plenty fast, and nice and fluid for those awkward Pyraminx turns. As you can see, the corner cutting is great in both directions. It's definitely a lot better than my main, and it doesn't do the weird thing that the Gan does sometimes, where it corner cuts in the wrong direction. And while I have the Gan Pyraminx out here, my biggest complaint about this one is that it just feels almost a little bit flimsy, like it's just sort of unstable. The pieces are just gonna kind of pop out, whereas this one is not at all like that. It feels super solid, and I guess that's just because of the much simpler design. And finally, the magnet strength on this one is pretty much perfect, just enough to give you that nice snap into place after every single turn without ever overshooting. The tips are also great, with relatively strong magnets so that you don't accidentally hit one when you don't mean to, but easy enough to turn one when you do. This is actually one of the modifications that they did to this puzzle by taking out some of the magnets from the tips. They also removed some of the washers from the core, which apparently makes it more flexible, who knew? And of course set it up with some heavier lube, which of course makes it very controllable. I guess I should finally mention that this puzzle, with all of those modifications and setup, is just $16. That is less than a stock version of my X-Man Bell V2, which definitely isn't as good right out of the box. Oh yeah, and if you're thinking of the enhanced Gan Pyraminx, well, this thing is $29. So, needless to say, if you're looking for a really good performing, fully set up Pyraminx at a very good price, then this would absolutely be my best recommendation. In fact, it's probably also now my main Pyraminx. Oh, and also, they've released an even more heavily modified version of the Shengshao Mr. M Pyraminx called the Dr. M, which for $30 I'm sure performs even better than this one. And there's also the Steven's Gan Pyraminx for $45 if you're into this puzzle and want one really nicely set up. All of those of course will be linked down in the description. Anyway, on to the second puzzle of this video, which I teased as a flagship 3x3 competitor from X-Man at a pretty good price. X-Man, a sub-brand of Chi-Yi, is of course well known for making all sorts of really good speed cubes, but interestingly, the last 3x3 they made was over 5 years ago with the X-Man Tornado. That's well before even magnets were a thing. So this puzzle I'm holding in my hands right now is the X-Man Tornado V2. So your color scheme is very normal. It actually looks very similar to a Gan Cube, especially with the black insides. I guess the green is a little bit darker though, and it has a non-removable printed on logo. So let's go ahead and do some first turns. Alright. Yeah, that's actually pretty nice. Like any would-be flagship 3x3, I mean, it's plenty smooth, fluid, controllable, all of that stuff. I guess the biggest thing that stands out to me is that it feels very solid, like stable and just very high quality. I guess I'll just come out and say that this cube costs $25, and compared to a cheaper cube like the RS3M 2020, it just feels, yeah, more expensive. It seems very high quality, even in just the feel of the plastic. Like this one definitely feels a little bit cheaper, not necessarily flimsy, but this one definitely feels the opposite of flimsy. And beyond that, it's hard for me to really fit a word to the turning. Like it's a fairly lightweight puzzle, but it doesn't feel light and airy like the Gan. It's not like buttery smooth like a Volk, and it's not like crunchy like a Moyu. And by the way, these are kind of what I would consider the flagship 3x3s of today. In order of price, the Gan 11M Pro at $65, the Volk Elite M at $45, and the Moyu WRM 2020 at $35. Lining up this cube would go right here at $25. So clearly at $25, this cube has got to be a pretty good deal, assuming it stands up in terms of performance. And from what I've seen so far, it seems like it does, with maybe one exception. If we take a look at the corner cutting, it can go just over 45 forwards, which is pretty normal, but backwards, it can do maybe just over half a cubie pretty easily, but you go any more than that and it just gets stuck. All three of those other flagships I showed can reverse corner cut a little bit further, so keep that in mind if you're used to one of these cubes, that it could cause a little bit of lockups and a little bit less fluidity while turning really fast. So while that may be a deal breaker for some people, I feel like this cube still has a ton of potential, and that's especially true once you see how much adjustability it has. So there's three different things that can be adjusted. Magnet strength, tensions, and spring compression, or basically how much the springs push back on you. Each of those three settings are very easy to adjust, which I'm about to show you, and they each can be changed to one of 5 different settings, which is by far the most overall adjustability I've ever seen in a 3x3. First up, magnet strength. Just turn aside 45 degrees, and you can see on each edge there's a magnet with a line down the middle, pointing to a plus and a minus sign for the strongest and weakest setting, and there's a total of 5 settings in between. So just take a flathead screwdriver, or it comes with the tool you can use, stick it in that little notch, and then spin it in the direction you want. Let's say we want the weakest magnets possible, so we'll move them all to the minus sign. Unfortunately, yes, you do have to do this on every single edge magnet, all 24 different places, but it shouldn't take more than a minute. Alright, we now have super weak magnets, although I will say that the strength is still pretty reasonable, and it could be a setting that some people prefer. Now to change the other settings, we have to take off all 6 center caps. It's pretty easy to do, just kind of stick your finger into the puzzle and then pull up on a little lip. And just note that these caps can only go on 2 of 4 different ways. So you see there's a little hole right there, and a little hole right there on the diagonals, and there's 2 little clips on here, so it can only go on like this or like this, but not like this. So keep that in mind once you're putting the caps back on, and don't try and force it if it doesn't seem like it's going in. But inside each center, we have this little colorful circle, unlike anything you've ever seen before. There is no screw, so you can't unscrew it and like lube the core, but that shouldn't be a big deal. So if you go ahead and look at the number inside the 2 little circles, that is the current tension on a scale from 1, the loosest, to 5, the tightest. And what you can do is spin the inner circle counterclockwise, and that'll change the number that's in those little circles and thus change the tension. I'm gonna improvise with this little screwdriver, but it actually comes with a tool that makes it a lot easier. And now we're on 4 and 5 and around to 1, and we could go all the way back around to 3. I'll just leave it on 1 for the time being to try out the loosest setting, and I'll go ahead and change that on all the different sides. Okay, time for the final adjustment, spring compression. The trick to this one is, rather than spinning this inner circle counterclockwise, which only spins the circle itself, you actually spin it clockwise, which also spins the outer circle with it, including all those colorful numbers. So this time, you're looking at the outer ring of numbers, and you know which one's selected based on this little notch in the black plastic right there. So right now 3 is pointing to it, which means we're on the 3rd spring compression setting. So if we go ahead and spin the entire thing clockwise, again, it's a lot easier than what I'm doing now if you use the included tool. So now the number 5 is pointing to the notch, which means we're on the most compressed and thus most springy setting. And if we go ahead and push it one more, now the number 1 is pointing to the notch, so we're on the least springy setting. Let's go ahead and do that on all sides. Alright, so now we should have the weakest magnets, the loosest tensions, and the weakest springs. Let's try this thing out, and it's actually not too far away from where it was before. You can definitely tell the difference. It almost feels like how some people like their Gan cubes, just super loose and fast, and yeah, I don't know. I think I'd have to change the magnet strength back to normal to be able to use it. There we go, that's better. So just for fun, let's go ahead and do our one last solve on the super loose but strangely nice version of this cube. And 3, 2, 1, go. Overall, I would say that this cube is better than most mid-range 3x3s, but not quite on par with some other flagships, mostly because of that reverse corner cutting issue. But if your turning is slower and more controlled, kind of like mine, and you just want a solid, high-quality 3x3 for a decent price, then I think this could very well be a good option, especially with all the adjustability. Anyway, that's pretty much it for the 2 main puzzles in this video, so let's go ahead and try out something fun. the Cube Display Stand from Gan. So this is supposed to be a cube stand for Gan cubes that's presumably in some way better than the original cube stand. It already looks very interesting. It looks like it comes in 2 different parts, one of which has a little spinny bit on the end. So presumably we attach this onto here, kind of like that. Okay, and now we can take a Gan puzzle. I'm sure some other ones will work, but let's just start with this one. So we'll stick it onto the cube kind of like this. And there we go. It's now a cube stand and it can spin. That is pretty funny. Now what happens if we press this little switch right here? Oh my gosh, it magnetically sticks into place. It feels like there's a magnet that's holding it in to some upright position or like a 45-degree position like this. There we go. That is just about the most useless but also strangely awesome thing to add onto a cube stand. I love it. What happens if we unlock it now? Now it can spin all around. And what happens if we try and put a different cube, like perhaps the tornado? Yeah, it fits on there just fine, and we can snap it into place. That is awesome. Of course, there's no guarantee that it'll work with every cube, but as long as it has reasonably rounded corners, I think there's a pretty good chance. And for $7, you can make up your own mind about whether it's worth it. Anyway, that's pretty much it for this fun little unboxing. As always, you can get everything I talked about in this video at TheCubicle.com. Links will be down in the description. And be sure and use discount code Z3Cubing for 5% off anything from their store. I would absolutely recommend something in the Stevens lineup of Pyraminx if you're looking for a good speed cube that's already set up. This one being, of course, the cheapest, with 2 more expensive options. The X-Man Tornado V2 is an interesting 3x3. I love the adjustability, and if you think you'd like it based on my description, then I think it could be a good alternative to some higher end flagship 3x3s. If not, maybe just get the RS3M 2020. It's $9 and also really good. And of course, the Gan Cube Stand is, well, a Gan Cube Stand. Anyway, I really hope you all enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys next time.